stripping Meghan and Andrew of their titles was the right course.
The room fell silent before King Charles had even finished speaking. In his hand was a private proposal bearing Meghan's name, Harry's future, and the reputation of the Royal Foundation itself. What began as a discreet request for influence had reached the monarch's desk, and Charles had made a decision no one expected. He would not quietly reject it. He would expose exactly what had been requested, who had carried the message, and why the palace considered it a direct challenge. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles entered the emergency meeting carrying the blue folder. William noticed first. Catherine saw that the king had dismissed the aide who handled sensitive papers. Princess Anne watched him sit without greeting anyone. The Royal Foundation, a charitable organization supporting causes connected to the Prince and Princess of Wales, was an important institution. Control meant influence, funding, and a place within the monarchy's future. The king opened the folder and spoke plainly. Meghan had attempted to secure a formal controlling role for Harry inside the foundation. The proposal demanded influence over charitable projects, campaigns, funding decisions, and international partnerships, although the Duke and Duchess of Sussex no longer served as working royals. Charles felt betrayed. Harry's name had been used to reopen a family settlement he believed resolved. William read the first page and hardened. He placed the document flat on the table and asked why the foundation was being treated as though it owed his brother a permanent position. Catherine stayed quiet, but understood the danger. The request was not symbolic. It demanded consultation rights before major announcements, giving Harry indirect power to delay or challenge projects led by the prince and his wife. Charles pointed to the phrase, "Family Reconciliation Initiative." The words sounded hopeful, yet the king explained that they concealed a harder objective: restoring Harry's royal relevance through institutional authority, without restoring the duties, limits, or accountability required of working royals. The silence deepened. Charles removed his glasses, closed the folder, and said the request would not remain hidden behind private correspondence. Anne watched his fingers tighten around the cover. Catherine realized he had chosen confrontation over containment. Then the king revealed one detail. A page was missing from William's copy. Charles still had it, and it identified the person inside the royal circle who had helped Meghan's proposal travel beyond a private request. But before that name could be spoken, everyone had to face the deeper truth. This was not merely a dispute over charity. It was a battle over Harry's place in the royal family. Behind the legal phrases and polished language were four people carrying very different wounds. Harry saw the foundation as proof that he still belonged. Meghan saw it as a bridge back to influence. William saw it as an intrusion into the work he had protected for years. And Charles saw something even more dangerous: a son searching for recognition through a structure that could not survive divided command. The proposal had exposed more than ambition. It had exposed what each of them feared losing. Harry had once treated joint charitable work as proof that he stood beside his brother, not behind him. The Royal Foundation, the organization used to manage major charitable campaigns connected to senior royals, had represented shared purpose and equal visibility. When that partnership ended, the Duke did not feel that he had simply stepped away. He felt that part of his identity had been removed and then rewritten without him. William carried a different burden. The foundation had become closely tied to his future with Catherine, reflecting years of work, public trust, and preparation for greater responsibility. The prince understood that outside control would not merely affect a few projects. It could weaken the credibility of their household and confuse who was truly responsible when decisions succeeded or failed. Harry admitted his fear during a quiet conversation with Meghan. He told her that every new campaign launched without his name made it seem as though the palace had erased his contribution. He did not describe the proposal as a demand for power. He called it protection against being forgotten. Meghan pushed the papers back toward him. She told Harry that recognition without authority could be withdrawn whenever the palace found it convenient. Her frustration sharpened as she insisted that his place had to be secured formally, because private promises meant nothing once advisors changed and loyalties shifted. Charles saw the danger immediately. Several phrases inside the request sounded less like Harry's emotional language and more like Meghan's strategic thinking. The king began to suspect that his son understood the desire behind the proposal, but not the full reach of the powers being requested in his name. Catherine found another threat. Two proposed initiatives overlapped directly with work she had spent years developing. If Harry's office attached itself publicly to those campaigns, leadership would blur, old rivalries would reopen, and every success could become another argument over ownership. William stood alone by the palace window, rereading the phrase, co-equal founding principles. Catherine entered quietly and watched him tighten his grip on the page. He told her the wording was designed to make any refusal look like one brother stripping another of his birthright. Then Anne found something worse. She recognized that phrase from an earlier family occasion, one that had ended with a sharp exchange no one had publicly acknowledged. That moment had seemed minor then. Now it looked like the spark Meghan had turned into a formal demand, and the point when Charles could no longer dismiss the conflict as family frustration. Months before the blue folder reached Charles, the first warning appeared during a reception at Windsor Castle. There were no shouting headlines, no public argument, and no dramatic departure. There was only one conversation beside a closed drawing room door, a conversation Harry would remember as humiliation, and Meghan would remember as proof. What was said that evening transformed a private resentment into a strategy. Looking back, everyone would identify that reception as the moment the conflict crossed the point of no return. Harry approached William after the charitable ceremony had ended and asked for one thing: permanent public recognition as a founding figure in future Royal Foundation announcements. The foundation was the formal organization used to manage major charitable campaigns linked to senior royals, which meant recognition there carried more than sentimental value. It offered status, continuity, and a lasting place within the family's public legacy. William chose his words carefully. He told Harry that past contribution could be acknowledged, but historical recognition was not the same as present authority. The prince offered to preserve his brother's earlier work in official records, yet he refused to create an ongoing role for someone operating outside the working royal structure. Harry heard something colder. Two senior aides were standing nearby, close enough to witness the exchange. The Duke believed his brother had chosen that location deliberately, turning what should have been private into an institutional refusal. William denied trying to humiliate him, but the damage had already landed. Harry walked away convinced that he had been reduced from partner to footnote. Meghan saw the change immediately. Harry returned to her, loosened his collar, and said William had spoken as though years of service no longer mattered. She listened as he described the conversation, then told him that informal promises would never restore his place. A courtier beyond the partly closed door heard her next words clearly. Then stop asking for a place and secure one. The sentence later reached Princess Anne through a documented palace account, and she recognized it when the formal proposal appeared months later. Meghan began requesting old foundation records that same night. She asked for founding statements, archived announcements, and internal material showing Harry's early involvement. She presented it as personal research, but those records became the backbone of the later claim. Harry placed an old photograph of himself and William beside the notes. Meghan circled the phrase, founding patron, a term describing someone publicly tied to an organization's creation. He stared at the photograph and said he wanted his children to know he had once belonged to something that mattered. Yet the records she received could not all have come from public archives. Someone inside the palace had supplied them. The Windsor reception created the wound, but hidden assistance turned that wound into a weapon. And when Charles summoned Meghan and Harry, the family's private fracture finally became a direct confrontation. There were no cameras, no secretaries taking notes, and no carefully arranged public smiles. Charles sat opposite Meghan with the proposal between them. Harry remained at her side, tense and pale, while William stood near the fireplace refusing to sit. Every person in that room understood that one wrong sentence could destroy what remained of the family relationship. Then Charles asked the question Meghan had prepared for, but the answer she gave changed the confrontation entirely. Charles had chosen the smaller palace sitting room because he wanted no institutional shield between them. Only the king, William, Harry, Meghan, and Princess Anne were present. The Royal Foundation, the charitable organization directing major public campaigns associated with senior working royals, could not become a private route back into official power. That boundary mattered because its leadership carried public trust, financial responsibility, and influence over the monarchy's future priorities. The king looked directly at Meghan and asked whether the proposal was truly about recognizing Harry's past or restoring his authority. She answered without hesitation, Harry had helped build the Foundation's international profile, and excluding him from future decisions, while continuing to benefit from his history, was not reconciliation. It was controlled exclusion. Meghan's words struck hard. Charles replied that Harry remained free to support causes, create charities, and speak publicly. He could not, however, secure protected control over an institution connected to working royal duty while remaining outside its restrictions and accountability. The king's voice stayed calm, but his disappointment was unmistakable. Harry turned toward William. He asked whether the refusal was genuinely about governance, or whether his brother simply could not tolerate sharing the platform again. The prince held his silence for a moment, then lost it. Trust, he said, could not be written into a legal clause after it had already been damaged within the family. Anne watched both brothers carefully. She had expected anger, but not what came next. Charles opened the folder and removed the missing appendix, an additional section attached to a formal proposal that expands its terms. The page granted Harry's representatives the right to dispute Foundation projects considered harmful to the Sussex reputation. Personal image concerns could therefore delay royal campaigns led by William and Catherine. Harry read the page twice. His expression changed. He turned to Meghan and asked when the language had been added. She did not answer. Meghan reached for the appendix, but Charles placed his palm firmly over it. The proposal had arrived under Harry's name, he said, and would have tied his son to powers he had not fully understood. Harry stepped away from the table, visibly shaken, while William realized the conflict had just shifted. Then the king disclosed one final fact. A palace-connected advisor had refined the appendix, believing William could be pressured into accepting it to prevent another public family rupture. The confrontation had divided Harry and Meghan in a single moment, but the greater shock was still ahead. The advisor knew the monarchy well enough to understand exactly where the pressure would hurt most. The proposal had not traveled from California to the king's desk by accident. It moved through private calls, old loyalties, archived documents, and one advisor who believed the palace could be forced into compromise. Charles now understood that Meghan's request was not an isolated appeal. It was a carefully constructed pressure campaign designed to make refusal appear cruel, acceptance appear healing, and William appear responsible for whichever choice damaged the family more. An unofficial intermediary had first contacted a former royal charitable advisor, someone familiar with the language used inside palace foundations and public campaigns. The Royal Foundation mattered because it joined charitable work, family history, public trust, and royal identity in one institution. A permanent role there carried far more weight than a ceremonial invitation. It offered legitimacy, visibility, and a lasting claim on the monarchy's future. The advisor reviewed the proposal and changed its tone. Harry's requested authority was no longer presented as a transfer of control. It became a reconciliation mechanism, a formal bridge that could supposedly heal old wounds. That language made rejection dangerous. Anyone refusing it could be accused of rejecting peace itself. Princess Anne confronted the former advisor in a private palace office. She placed the hidden appendix on the desk and asked whether sympathy for Harry justified creating a structure capable of weakening William. The Princess Royal, the king's sister, and one of the monarchy's most experienced working members, understood how quickly private emotion could become public pressure. The advisor defended the decision. Harry had been left without a meaningful path back, he argued, and the proposal was meant to prevent permanent estrangement. Anne did not soften. Reconciliation built through concealed leverage, she replied, was not reconciliation at all. It was pressure, wearing the language of compassion. Charles then received a documented briefing on the communication plan prepared for rejection. Draft statements would portray Harry as the excluded co-founder of a charitable legacy now controlled by William alone. The wording referenced his service, his emotional history, and his children's royal connection. Meghan's strongest weapon was clear: make an institutional refusal look like punishment aimed at an entire family. The king sat alone after the briefing and opened an early draft. A handwritten note from Harry was attached. "I only want to know there is still something of mine there." Charles read it twice. His anger weakened into sorrow before he folded the note and returned it to the file. William remained firm. A private rejection would not be enough. Unless the palace explained the hidden authority Meghan had sought, the prepared narrative could still make Harry appear to be the only victim. The king had reached his decision, but announcing it would release the storm the proposal had been designed to create. and the first person forced to stand inside that storm would be Harry himself. The final rejection contained no insulting language and no personal accusation. That made it more painful. It stated, in precise terms, that Harry would receive no governing authority, no consultation rights, no protected public role, and no power to challenge Foundation projects. The document closed every route the proposal had attempted to open. When Harry read the final paragraph, he did not become angry. He became still, and that silence frightened Meghan more than any argument could have. Charles had signed the decision that morning. The written rejection, a formal document recording the palace's final position, declared that the Royal Foundation would remain under its established leadership. Non-working members of the royal family could support charitable causes, but they could not hold protected authority over an institution tied to official duty, public money, and royal accountability. William moved immediately. He ordered a review of archived records, advisor permissions, document access, and outside communications. The prince understood why it mattered. Internal material had already been used to support a private claim, and another breach could weaken trust inside the Foundation while creating fresh confusion over who truly controlled its work. Harry sat with the decision beside a cup of tea that had long gone cold. His hand stopped at the sentence, stating that past contribution created no permanent authority. He read it again, then looked at Meghan. "They have separated what I did from who I am," he said quietly. The words carried more pain than anger. Meghan refused to accept defeat. She told Harry that Charles had exposed the proposal to humiliate them into silence and make the palace appear firm. She began outlining a public response, but he cut her off. He did not want another strategy. He wanted to know why the final appendix contained powers he had never knowingly approved. Harry asked to see every draft, email, and revision connected to the request. Meghan hesitated before agreeing. That pause changed everything. For the first time, the Duke understood that the campaign had not merely damaged his relationship with the palace. It had created doubt inside his own marriage. Charles then bypassed every advisor. Through a direct personal message, the king asked his son to speak without lawyers, secretaries, or prepared statements. He made one distinction clear. Rejecting the proposal did not mean rejecting Harry. Meghan left, after Harry said he would take the call alone. The door closed softly. He remained seated with the rejection in one hand and Charles's message open on his phone, caught between fury and the possibility of honesty. The institution had delivered its verdict, but father and son had not yet spoken without someone else shaping the words, and their private conversation would become the turning point of the entire crisis. For the first time since the proposal surfaced, there was no Meghan, no William, no private secretary, and no legal language. There was only Charles and Harry. The king expected anger. Instead, he heard exhaustion. Harry did not begin by defending the appendix or demanding a title. He began by admitting that every new Foundation announcement made him feel as though his former life had continued without him. That confession did not reverse Charles's decision, but it changed the meaning of the conflict. Charles met his son alone in a modest room at Clarence House. Both men agreed that no recording, written statement, or advisor's summary would be produced. Clarence House, the king's London residence, offered something the palace had failed to provide for years: a space where father and son could speak without every sentence becoming part of an official record. The king made the first distinction. Refusing the Foundation request was a duty, not a declaration that Harry had ceased to be his son. Charles admitted that palace language often made institutional limits sound like emotional rejection. A formal no could protect the monarchy while still cutting deeply into the person receiving it. Harry finally named the wound. He said he had never truly wanted to manage William's projects or interfere with Catherine's work. He wanted proof that leaving royal duties had not erased everything he had helped build. Fear had driven him to accept a strategy he had not fully examined, and pride had stopped him from asking harder questions. Charles listened without interruption. Then he admitted his own failure. The king had answered too many painful disputes through secretaries, because direct conversation had become exhausting. That distance created a vacuum. Advisors filled it. Grievances grew inside it. Public narratives became stronger than private truth. Harry then revealed, through that unrecorded conversation, that he had asked Meghan to suspend every prepared public response. He would not defend powers he had never knowingly approved, even if withdrawing made him appear weak. Charles understood the cost of that choice. It placed Harry between loyalty to his wife and responsibility for his own name. The king offered no title and no governing role. He did, however, agree that the Foundation's historical archive, the official record preserving its past work, could accurately document Harry's earlier contribution without suggesting present control. It was recognition without authority. Harry removed the rejection letter from his coat, folded it once, and placed it on the table. Charles did not reach for it. He moved his chair closer and told his son that returning to the family could not begin with returning to power. Charles and Harry left with the first honest understanding they had reached in years. Yet outside the palace gates, broadcasters and newspapers were preparing to judge them far more harshly. By morning, the private proposal had become the only royal story that mattered. Commentators argued over ambition, exclusion, loyalty, and betrayal. Supporters of Harry saw a prince denied recognition. Defenders of William saw an attempt to seize influence without responsibility. Yet one image came to define the public mood: a newspaper held above the crowd outside Buckingham Palace, its front page showing Charles with the blue folder beneath a single declaration: "The King draws the line." Buckingham Palace moved quickly. A carefully worded statement confirmed that no new role would be created for Harry within the royal foundation, and that its governance would remain unchanged. Governance meant the system deciding who held authority, approved projects, and carried responsibility when public trust or charitable funding was at stake. The message sounded calm, but its meaning was absolute. Broadcasters immediately split the story in two. One side asked whether Meghan had tried to regain royal influence through Harry. The other asked whether the palace had failed to offer him a dignified way to preserve his past service. Every discussion returned to the same wound. Recognition had become impossible to separate from control. William watched the coverage beside Catherine. A presenter called the proposal a direct challenge to his leadership. The prince felt vindicated because the hidden terms were finally understood, yet he was disturbed by how quickly Harry's pain had become entertainment. Catherine reminded him that public victory could still carry a private cost, especially when the person losing was his own brother. Meghan watched the narrative turn against her. Commentators focused on the appendix Harry had not reviewed and questioned whether she had demanded more authority than he understood. Her frustration sharpened as the debate moved away from royal exclusion and toward whether she had exceeded her husband's wishes. Then the expected Sussex statement failed to appear. Journalists waited for a denial, an accusation, or a defense. Nothing came. The silence created more tension than words could have produced, suggesting that Harry had blocked the response prepared in his name. Charles allowed one detail to emerge through a documented palace briefing. He and his son had spoken directly. No further account was offered. That restraint changed the tone. The public began to see that father and son might be separating their personal relationship from the institutional dispute. Outside Buckingham Palace, a woman held the newspaper above the crowd, while another placed flowers beside the railing. Her handwritten card carried 5 words: "Choose peace over position." The two gestures captured the entire conflict: judgment in one hand, hope in the other. The crowds eventually dispersed and the headlines changed, but one final decision remained inside the family: whether the exposure would become another permanent scar or the boundary that finally ended the struggle. The attempt failed. Harry received no authority over the royal foundation. Meghan's proposed conditions were rejected, and Charles made certain that the institution could never be used as a hidden route back to royal power. Yet the king's final victory was not the public exposure or the signed refusal. It was the painful clarity that followed. Every person involved was forced to see what had been disguised by legal wording. A fight for influence had grown from a far more human fear, the fear of being forgotten. Charles closed the path permanently. Harry would hold no governing, consultation, veto, or representational authority within the royal foundation, while remaining outside official royal duties. A veto meant the power to stop a decision, and the king refused to give any outside household that control. The boundary protected charitable funding, public trust, and the future leadership of William and Catherine. William strengthened the foundation's governance rules, the formal system defining who could make decisions and carry responsibility. The prince ensured that family relationships could never again be turned into unofficial claims of institutional power. Catherine supported the changes, but she also reminded him that protecting the future did not require erasing the past. Harry accepted the boundary. He chose not to challenge the rejection publicly, because he finally understood that seeking recognition through authority would only deepen his rivalry with William. The Duke knew genuine reconciliation could never begin, while one brother feared losing control and the other feared disappearing completely. Meghan faced a harder truth. The strategy designed to restore Harry's standing had exposed the distance between what he emotionally wanted and what the proposal legally demanded. She had tried to secure influence, but the result created new tension inside their marriage. Harry wanted remembrance. The document had asked for power. Charles offered one final act of balance. Through a signed archival directive, a formal instruction governing the Foundation's historical records, the king authorized an accurate account of Harry's earlier contribution. His service would be preserved without suggesting that he still held present authority. William approved the decision after Catherine urged him to separate history from leadership. His agreement became a quiet gesture toward his brother. It did not weaken the boundary. It proved that strength did not require denial. Charles signed the directive and set down his pen. Harry's contribution was recognized. Meghan's proposal was closed. William's authority remained secure. The king placed the rejected appendix inside a locked cabinet, not as unfinished business, but as a warning never to confuse family love with institutional power. The exposure did not restore the old partnership or heal every wound. It delivered something more lasting: clarity. Harry could be remembered without being restored to authority. William could lead without denying their shared history. Charles could remain a father while acting as king. There was nothing left to negotiate, conceal, or threaten. The crown had drawn its line, the family had faced the truth, and the royal foundation moved forward under one clear leadership. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.